Hello and welcome to Barb Talks. Today we're talking about dolls from the 1920s. I have a home and have decorated it in kind of a late 1920s style just because it's a late 1920s home. And I've always enjoyed dolls from the 1920s as well. I started doll collecting when I was in grade school, actually about mid-grade school. And one of the dolls I really always wanted was called a frozen Charlotte. They were dolls that were from, the mid-19th century until the 1920s. And they were a very popular form of doll that was really small. It was made out of porcelain. They were characteristically stiff. They were like, well, I'll show you one. This is a frozen Charlotte. It is a doll that is small and made out of some sort of white porcelain or bisque. And most of them were women dolls. A man frozen Charlotte is actually quite rare. I got this in an antique store on the coast when I was in my 40s, I believe. I think this is one of the last dolls I collected. But they were really popular because they were cheap, and little girls would buy them and play with them, and then their brothers would take them and line them up and then do shooting practice with them. So they're kind of rare now. It's kind of hard to find an official frozen Charlotte because since they were such a cheap doll, they were considered expendable. I have a friend of mine who is a doll collector, and she also claims that these are also frozen Charlottes. They have the 1920 haircuts, and they're made out of bisque as well, but they don't have the one frozen look. I mean, this isn't frozen when it has an arm that works, but these are probably more of what the girl dolls would look like with a similar molded hairstyle and painted on style. So those are my frozen Charlottes. Another 1920s doll I got when I was in high school, and my best friend had a mom who was an antique collector, and she had all kinds of antiques, including dolls. And in one of her mini cabinets, she had these two half-doll brooms. And again, you can tell by the looks of them that this was 1920s style, made in Japan. The half dolls themselves were around since the 1800s. And usually they'd have the half doll and they would sew it onto a pin cushion. These were decorative, make things look fun and imaginative by pin cushions or turning them into tea cozies. They were kind of a craft item that were sold in craft shops and women's dress shops so that women could turn these half dolls into practical items. In the 1920s, part of that practical item was to turn them into little whisk brooms so that you could sweep off your table to get crumbs away, that type of thing, or to dust. They were dainty porcelain bisque figurines, fashionable in the early 20th century, with an upper body, head, arms, but no legs. These dolls were produced in the thousands at the height of their popularity, being manufactured by German factories. And due to the changes in manufacturing, the dolls started to be mass-produced, making the doll more affordable, but also a little poorly molded and badly glazed. And these were made in Japan ones, so I suppose these would be the more affordable ones. But I still think they're really cute. And these later ones, most of them were made in Japan, but some of them were made in the United States. Sometimes skirts were sewn on them, and then they were used to cover up makeup, powder boxes to hide things. I think I also have seen these to cover toilet paper rolls for storage in bathrooms. So these were pretty little storage containers that you could just lift off the top and have the storage container below it. And the most popular half dolls were modeled after pretty women, and most are between 2 to 6 inches tall, which these are. Male dolls were produced too, in addition to children, such as a pair of Dutch boy and Dutch girl half dolls, and a variety of animals. But again, the most popular were these little beautiful women dolls. So those from my half doll collection from the 20s. In the 1900s, when wealthy families would travel, it was a hobby to collect dolls from the exotic places they traveled to. And my aunt, when she was young, had traveled with her family, my mom and parents, to Greece and to explore Europe. And one of the dolls she brought back was this Greek soldier doll. And it is made out of fabric, looks like machine sewn fabric, and it's fashioned with, feels like sawdust in the main part of the body probably, and it feels like some sort of rags or fabric in here that's pretty firm. But this was a Greek soldier doll, and it has the dress of what a Greek soldier would wear. And it's fairly detailed as well with the beads. The face is a cardboard. So this would be a souvenir quality type of doll. I'm not sure exactly when my aunt went on this trip, but she handed this down to me for my doll collection. This doll I actually got in the 1990s, but it represents the dress of the 1920s. There was a period of time where doll collecting was very much a hobby. I don't know if it is so much anymore. You can find this kind of 90s collectible doll all the time in thrift stores now. But she had a 1920s little hair bob and a 1920s dress for a wealthy young girl. My sister bought that for me in the 90s for my doll collection. But that represents the hairstyle and dress of the period. And last but not least, from the 1920s, a Kewpie doll. The Kewpie dolls were popular in the 1910s and 1920s, and they were created by Rose O'Neal, an American illustrator, author, and businesswoman. And so she wrote these stories in magazines, and they featured Kewpie dolls. And they were these cutie Kewpies that went on all kinds of adventures together. And the stories and illustrations became very popular and kind of a fad in the United States, Australia, Japan, and all over the world for their representations of a symbol of innocence and love. And they represented fun, and during a time when we needed more fun. O'Neal also ended up using the dolls to help in women's rights and civil rights and racial equity. Those stories aren't as well known, but the stories went from the print to then she created dolls that were porcelain dolls, and they were sold in stores. They were also given away in carnivals. This particular one is a vinyl one, and from what I've read, vinyl Kewpie dolls became mass-produced in the 70s. So I don't see any, well, it does say KDO, I think. I'll have to look that up and see if it was from the 70s or not. But I just love the little look of the guy, and I can see why they were popular, because they are so darn cute and innocent looking. So that's my Kewpie doll. Oh, one additional note. A reason why this particular frozen Charlotte caught my attention was because my grandfather was in a band in 1917 that traveled the world. It was called, he was in the Thomas Saxet or Saxetet. I'm not exactly sure, but he played saxophone in this men's group that traveled around the world. I think they had a female singer. So this represents not only a frozen Charlotte, but for me, it represents my grandfather during that time, being kind of a fancy man in a band. So thanks for being along with me today and enjoying time exploring dolls from the 1920s. And thanks for watching Barb Talks.